Welcome, everyone. We're just going to wait a couple of minutes to make sure everybody is able to start joining the webinar. All right, Commissioner, do you want to start us off?
Yes, thank you, Cindy, and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Let me just start by saying, LaSalle Street is really unlike any commercial corridor in our city. I mean, it's the historic heart of Chicago's Central Business District. It's a spectacular urban canyon that extends from the Chicago Riverwalk and ends in the iconic Art Deco styled skyscraper, the Chicago Board of Trade building. We are just incredibly excited to see the significant interest in this invitation for proposals to adaptively reuse the underutilized office buildings along this great street to create something that is more resilient, more mixed use, right in the heart of the loop. So the proposals, the invitation for proposals, it's part for us, a part of a comprehensive reimagining that involves multiple city agencies and private partners to strategically position LaSalle Street as a corridor, a vibrant corridor, both in terms of its building uses and its streetscape. So the invitation for proposals, our goal has been to turn LaSalle Street into a 15-minute neighborhood where affordable housing can be found as a result of underutilized office spaces, and that we can reactivate vacant storefronts that tilt towards neighborhood serving retail, and that we can create new cultural dining and entertainment amenities that leverage the potential of LaSalle on behalf of the entire city. So the department genuinely appreciates your interest in this IFP, and we're really looking forward to collaborating with you to create a much stronger, more vibrant LaSalle Street corridor. I'm really excited by the level of interest you've expressed, and just thank you, Cindy, for setting this agenda, which I think will be incredibly informative for those who are interested in moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Cox. I do want to introduce myself as well as the other city staff who have joined us on this webinar today. I'm Cindy Chan-Rubik. I have been working with the Department of Planning and Development for about 17 years now. I'm Deputy Commissioner, and I manage the Central, North, and Northwest planning regions for the department. Co-managing this initiative with me is Emily Thrun, of the Central Region, one of the Central Region planners, and she's been instrumental in developing this initiative and coordinating with the multiple departments for this initiative. And then we also have Ricardo Lopez from the Department of Housing. We are really collaborating very closely with the Department of Housing on this IFP specifically. And we have Tara Vup from Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events, because they are also our partners in making sure that we revitalize LaSalle Street with cultural uses in mind, art, placement of art, and making sure this becomes a tourist destination as well. And then First Deputy Melvin Wesley from the Department of Planning and Development, he manages our planning and design bureau and works very closely together with the commissioner and all of the leadership in the other bureaus as well. And then we have David Conway, who is our communications person, and he will be helping us behind the scenes running this webinar. We are recording the webinar and we will place the recording on our webpage of LaSalle Street, city of Chicago.gov/LaSalle Street. So if you miss this webinar, if you have other people you're working with, collaborating with, please make sure to share the link so they're able to view this at their leisure. Okay, so I will hand off the rest of the presentation to Emily. She'll go through some of the slides, and we have other folks who will chime in as well.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I will first start with just going over the quick run of show of today. We already did welcome and introductions, and then we will present some LaSalle corridor data, present a little bit more about our vision for the LaSalle Street Reimagine initiative, and then also go over the invitation for proposals, and finally open up the session with a Q&A. So before we start, I have a few housekeeping items that I wanted to address. As Cindy mentioned, this is a Zoom webinar, and this meeting will be recorded. After the webinar, it will be posted on our City of Chicago LaSalle Street website at the link on the slide. Please use the Zoom Q&A function for any questions you may have for this webinar. And all questions and ideas are valid. Questions may be responded to city staff in either writing or verbally during this meeting. And with that, I'll start off with presenting some basic information about the LaSalle corridor. As the commissioner mentioned, LaSalle has been historically the financial, banking, legal, and government office district in the Loop. In fact, the corridor contains many historic buildings, with 59% of the offices or of the buildings predating 1940. Within the invitation for proposal corridor, there are 7 designated landmark buildings, and most of the corridor is located within a National Register Historic District. 85% of the real estate in the area is dedicated to office use, so it's very much an office monoculture in the area, and 26% of that office space is vacant. This is the highest vacancy rate for any comparable downtown submarket areas. The corridor also has a 36% retail vacancy, also the highest among the comparable downtown submarket corridors. One other thing I wanted to point out, there is a lack of affordability in this corridor. There's no ARO, affordable requirement ordinance units within the corridor itself. However, the corridor is 100% transit served, meaning that the parking requirement for these buildings can be reduced to 0 via administrative adjustments. So this is some of the planning work that we have completed so far. The city published the Central City Recovery Roadmap last year in collaboration with over 150 stakeholders to identify 90 action items. One of them being focusing on corridor-specific planning, including LaSalle Street. Earlier this year, ULI Chicago, with support from our department and the Chicago Loop Alliance, convened a technical assistance panel to develop recommendations to reposition LaSalle Street. And with they interviewed over 70 stakeholders along the corridor, and they were engaged throughout the process to develop those recommendations. Also this year, our department procured AECOM to provide a market analysis for the corridor, which supports multi-unit residential, dining, entertainment, and tourism and cultural uses as good investments for the corridor. And additionally, the city released the draft of the We Will Chicago citywide plan, whose key principles are equity and resiliency. The draft document will be updated after a public comment period and presented to the Chicago Plan Commission earlier next year for adoption. So this slide includes some data from the AECOM study, among other sources that we collected, that validate that residential is a good investment for the corridor. The volume of leased multifamily residential units has increased 113% within the corridor since 2000. The corridor has also seen a 53% increase in rent per square foot for multifamily units since 2000, and the rental rate per square foot is almost 65% higher than rental rates in the Chicago metro area. Since 2010, the Loop community area has grown more than any other Chicago community area, with its population increasing by nearly 45%. Also, in the past few years, there have been successful short-term activations along the corridor that I wanted to highlight. Lunch on Lasalle and Be Part of the Art by MoMA took place last year, and Be Part of the Art is currently ongoing. The Pride Crosswalk installation was installed by CDOT during June, and then in 2000 earlier this summer, the 2022 Activate event sponsored by the Chicago Loop Alliance with support from City of Chicago happened. And again, we were very excited to hear this summer's announcement that the Thompson Center will be renovated as a headquarters for Google, while the state will be relocating to 115 South LaSalle. Google is a welcome addition to this corridor, and it surely will play a role in revitalizing the corridor. Based on the studies and reports, we believe LaSalle's future can be maximized on behalf of the entire city by revitalizing the current monoculture of office uses with a mix of uses and activities that extend beyond the typical 9-to-5 community. Therefore, we have launched the LaSalle Street Reimagine Initiative to create a place for innovation rooted in principles of equity and resiliency. The initiative has 5 major themes: global innovation, public realm enhancements, neighborhood-oriented business growth, affordable housing expansion, and historic building sustainability. And we will be providing assistance to support the following goals: supporting historic conversions to create affordable housing, supporting cultural and dining businesses, and creating an inviting and forward-thinking street. I will now turn the presentation over to my colleagues, Ricardo and Cindy, who will provide further details regarding these goals and more information about the invitation for proposals.
Thank you, Emily. Good afternoon, everyone. Ricardo Lopez, ARO Project Manager with the Department of Housing. So our first goal here is to support more affordable housing along the corridor where currently there aren't any. So as part of this invitation for proposals, we're seeking up to 3 adopted reuse proposals. The qualified proposal will need to provide a minimum of 30% of affordable units on site to households earning an average of income of 60% of the area median income. Projects must also be located on or within a block of the Lasalle Street, must provide grocery store and activation of brand interior spaces, and need to exceed the city's 6% MWBE goals for construction. The next steps for this goal is to respond to the invitation for proposals that was issued on September 26th, which is due by noon on December 23 of this year. So I'll turn it over to Cindy for the next goal.
Thank you, Ricardo. Yes, the second goal is to support cultural and dining locally owned businesses. And this is part of the Small Business Improvement Fund, which is a program that's been used citywide and available to eligible businesses and property owners in TIF districts. As you can see on the right, the diagram, we have this initiative and grant program available on the north side, on the south side, on the west side. We haven't done it in the downtown area before, in the loop before. So this is something new for us. And we would be developing support, as I said, for the same geography as the invitation for proposals geography, focusing on the LaSalle corridor and the blocks just east and west of the LaSalle corridor. We would be doing a short-term customized program with wider eligibility specific for the condition of downtown buildings and address the retail vacancy here. Once this customized program and funding is approved by City Council, and we would target having that process be completed the customized program, we're looking to submit the ordinance sometime before the end of this year and then have the funding allocated sometime next year so that we could really start developing the allocation for and identifying applicants through the system that is administered by Summer Corps. Again, as part of this overall Small Business Improvement Fund program. So again, we're looking to submit that ordinance by the end of 2022 and targeting the first allocation round in 2023. And so this would be running concurrently with this IFP. It's separate and distinct from this IFP because the IFP we're focusing on large scale kind of redevelopment, adaptive reuse projects for the entire buildings, whereas this is really focused on providing a grant assistance for many businesses along the corridor. And then we're working very closely with our colleagues at the Chicago Department of Transportation to create an inviting and forward-thinking street along Lasalle. First, they're going to start with conducting an engineering assessment of the existing physical and structural conditions along Lasalle Street, understanding the limitations of underground vaults, for example, and understanding the existing conditions. We're also going to be undertaking some visioning work is part of the plan. And then both of those documents would then inform a call for a design team to create a safe and inviting and innovative LaSalle public realm. And our goals for this design process would be to stitch together our important civic and cultural assets along the corridors, such as the Riverwalk. We know there are also a lot of grand lobbies and interior spaces that many people have not experienced. They don't even maybe know that they are there along the corridor. So we want to make sure that people are drawn from the Riverwalk and other parts of the loop into LaSalle Street Canyon and experience the splendor of what the street has to offer and what these buildings have to offer. And also we want to consider illumination. That's going to be a really strong and important aspect of the experience of the canyon in the evening time. Because we know one of the unique assets, as Commissioner Cox stated at the beginning, we have all these historic buildings, this iconic view down to the Chicago Board of Trade building. And we really think this is an opportunity to incorporate lighting in a new way. So again, this is an ongoing process. We will continue working with Chicago Department of Transportation as well as CTA and other public agencies and property owners that would be impacted along the corridor as well. Next slide. So we included a map both on our webpage, but also in the invitation for proposal. This is very important for anyone who is interested in submitting a response to this invitation. We're looking for buildings that fall within this dark blue boundary. And this is again coordinating with the making sure that it's all within the LaSalle Central TIF, of course, but also including, the historic buildings that we can within this area, generally spanning from, mid-block, just north of Washington, all the way down to obviously the end of the canyon. And we're prioritizing for the submissions, we would be prioritizing buildings that are already designated Chicago landmarks or eligible to be designated Chicago landmarks, contributing buildings to the West Loop LaSalle Street National Register districts, which really are overlapped with the buildings that are rated orange by the Chicago Historic Resources Survey. We did get some questions about what about the buildings that are rated red by the Chicago Historic Resources Survey. Those that are rated red are already designated Chicago landmarks. So that's kind of encapsulated in the first part of what we've identified as our priority buildings. Next slide. Oh, Ricardo, I'll let you present this.
Thank you, Cindy. Hi again. So the affordable housing program it's our goal to target a minimum of 30% of the units on site to be affordable. We want to give you sort of a breakdown of what the AMI levels are. At the 60% AMI, just by way of example of what that household income value is by the number of members in the household. So one-person household at 60% AMI is 43,800. Two-person household is 50,000. Three-person 56,280, and 62,520 for a household of 4 persons. Again, the idea of targeting a weighted average of 60% AMI is to allow us to achieve the goal of bringing in a wide range of income levels for the affordable units that are to be provided. The unit mixes in terms of unit types for the affordable units could be anywhere between studios to 3-bedroom units. The way that we would look at it is by way of comparability. What's being built in the market rate unrestricted units, the mix for the affordable units would have to be proportionally mixed to reflect what's being built in the market rate units. Just to reemphasize one of the other program priorities for city funding assistance is to also include a grocery store and locally owned cultural and dining businesses. Applicants should schedule an intake meeting with DOH. We'll provide the link to how to go about submitting an intake meeting to DOH on the Lasalle Street website, but it's also included in the package, in the RFI package. And applicants must also complete a DOH proforma for DOH to evaluate prior to meeting for the intake meeting.
Thanks, Ricardo. Next slide. Okay, so here's some a lot of text, but we wanted to provide a little bit more clarity and make sure we kind of proactively respond to some potential questions. So of course, the zoning in the LaSalle corridor is primarily DC 16, downtown core with this base 16. And this allows residential uses above the ground floor by right. It also allows restaurants, retail, indoor entertainment, lodging, and venue uses allowed by right, both at and above the ground floor. So very flexible zoning here. We also wanted to note again that the LaSalle Street corridor qualifies as a transit served location, and parking requirements can be reduced to 0 via administrative adjustment. There's also, if you are a designated Chicago landmark, no additional parking or loading requirements are required for the rehabilitation of those buildings. And then we wanted to clarify that the expansion or change of use in any existing building will be governed by the applicable portions of this particular section of the zoning code, section 17-8-0515. And just kind of high level summary of what it says there is, if you're not changing the height of the building, the existing building, if you're not expanding the bulk or the floor area of the existing building, you're not negatively impacting the surrounding area, then the change of use can be done again administratively. Minimum lot area reductions may be considered for buildings which are non-conforming for purposes of floor area. So if you already have an existing building that is higher than a DC 16, which many of these buildings are very large and they are already non-conforming in terms of their existing bulk, then what we allow per this section of the zoning code is for each 1% increase in floor area awarded through the floor area bonus provision, the minimum lot area per unit standard is reduced by 1%. And the minimum lot area per unit reduction may not exceed 30% regardless of the floor area bonus granted. So we would follow the same kind of ratio of change in terms of the MLA. And then please keep in mind that any projects, if you're applying for this, submitting for this invitation for proposal, and you are requesting TIF funds, you also need to make sure you would be complying with the Department of Planning's Sustainable Development Policy by meeting at least 50 points, because we anticipate that these would be significant rehabilitation projects. You're converting underutilized office space into residential uses. You're going to need bathrooms, kitchens, all those things, change in mechanical. And so you do need to make sure you are meeting the 50-point requirement. Next slide, please. So this really, again, for any projects that are asking for city assistance and funding, that would be triggering this compliance to meet the 26% minority participation for construction hiring for MBE firms, and at least 6% paid to women-owned business enterprises, WBE firms. You also must pay prevailing wage rates for all construction jobs. And then Chicago residents must perform at least half of all construction worker hours. And what we have said in the invitation for proposal is that the city desires for teams to exceed these minimums. These are the minimums, and we will consider this as part of the evaluation of selected projects. So please keep that in mind when we are evaluating all of your proposals. This is something, one of the criteria we are going to be looking at in terms of one of the goals of this invitation for proposal. Next slide. So the available incentives for this invitation for proposal, we have a variety of incentives at the federal, state, and county level. Of course, we are prioritizing historic buildings because you could then apply the 20% federal rehabilitation tax credit, which is an important incentive in reducing the gap funding required for your project. We also passed the Affordable Illinois Act last summer, and this was an important change to the tax code in our state, HB 2621, which provides a property tax reduction for property owners that have a certain percentage of their units on site that are affordable. So by responding to this invitation, you would be expected to take that Affordable Illinois incentive into consideration, again, to reduce your funding gaps. A lot of the buildings along the corridor are large, as I've said before, and some of them already have a portion of their building that they would want to keep as either office or hotel or both, and retail, of course, and that is fine, because, you know, if you only want to convert some of the floors into residential, then you can utilize the Class L property tax incentive for those commercial uses, for those commercial floors. And a lot of the properties along this corridor have actually, that our office and hotel have actually utilized this incentive in the past. So it's something that we know works well, especially when paired with the 20% federal rehabilitation tax credit. Then, of course, for City of Chicago incentives, we have the tax increment financing from the Lasalle Central Redevelopment Project area. We have low-income housing tax credits, and we have Chicago PACE. And we've provided a paragraph detailing these incentives in the invitation for proposal. So I really recommend that you look closely at those paragraphs if you have, if you need more information. Next slide. We do have an example that we wanted to highlight that was completed and approved by City Council in 2010. And so it's been a while, of course, but at the same time, this is kind of a format of what we're doing here today. So this was historic vacant office building. It was in very bad condition. The exterior wall of the terracotta building, the pieces of terracotta were, it was really deteriorated. A lot of netting had to be installed and temporary stabilization. And the building was even, the condition of it was being monitored by the Department of Buildings, and the bottom 2 floors, they had to recreate from historic drawings, the original terracotta detailing. So it was a lot of work, but they converted, the developers converted this vacant office building into 310 dwelling units. 20% of them are affordable on site. There also is a pretty significant size retail space on the ground floor that's used as a restaurant, almost 10,000 square feet. And then the second floor is retained as office space. And then there are residential amenities throughout the building. Just to kind of give a high level summary, the total project cost of this adaptive reuse project was $145 million, of which $34 million was subsidized by the Randolph Wells TIF. So that gives you an idea. This was subsidized. It was 23.4, the TIF subsidy was 23.4% of the total project cost. So we just wanted to highlight this as a successful outcome of that city assistance. And we've spoken with the owner somewhat recently, and they are doing very well in terms of renting out both their market rate units as well as their affordable units. Next slide. So again, the invitation for proposal goals and our evaluation criteria here are our goals. We want to support the revitalization of historic buildings and their grand interior spaces. We want to convert underutilized office space into residential uses and provide more affordable housing. 30% is our minimum requirement for city assistance. We want to activate vacant ground floor spaces with locally owned shopping, cultural, and dining amenities. And we want to improve the participation of minority-owned and women-owned businesses in downtown redevelopment proposals. It's important that downtown is a community that is inclusive and welcoming to all other community areas of the city. And then we have 3 evaluation criteria. Also, this is more detailed out in the invitation for proposals document, but high level summary, we are looking at how well does the project achieve the goals, these 4 goals, and also what is the potential for the proposal to catalyze other corridor investments. We're going to be looking at the team composition. What is the competence and experience of similar scope of work, historic rehabilitation commitment and track record, as well as minority participation on past projects, and what they're proposing for this response. Economic feasibility, we want to make sure that the respondent has sufficient financial qualifications and that there is a viability for the project. And we're looking at the ratio of public assistance relative to the contribution of the total project costs. So of course, keep in mind, we're looking at selecting up to 3 projects, and the more interest we get, the better, and the more the more reasonable the assistance that is needed, the more projects we can then support. So just keep that in mind as you're kind of developing your submissions. Next slide. So here we are on the timeline. We have been doing stakeholder coordination really since earlier this year. We released the invitation for proposal with the Mayor Lightfoot's announcement in the Rookery Atrium on September 26th in the afternoon. It was great. And then today is our pre-submission meeting. The IFPs are due by noon I just want to make sure everyone sees this. It's by noon on December 23rd. This is, and then we're looking to do a community meeting early next year, and then select the winners as well, following community feedback that we receive, and taking that into consideration as part of our review. And then once the winners are selected, of course, we have to go through the City Council and CDC process for the redevelopment agreements. We would hope to do that, later next year. And then the actual completion of the rehabilitation projects, the winning projects, we would like them to be complete, within a 2-year time frame after that. So we're looking at completion and occupancy in 2026. Next slide. Emily, I believe you're.
Okay, yep. With that, we will open it up to questions. I will look through our Q&A and we'll start from there. All right, so first question we have is a list of developer potential respondents available for the purpose of facilitating minority and women certified firms to team with developers respondents regarding their submission. I will say that after this webinar, we are going to post the list of attendees who signed up for the webinar, so that will be available on our website. I don't know if anyone else on the call has any further points to add to that.
No, that's exactly right. We'll share, just like we've done with our other RFP processes, we'll share the list of registered folks from this call on our webpage.
And the next question we have is, will there be an RFQ or RFP process after the RFI process?
So I can answer that. No, this invitation for proposals is really like an RFP process. We didn't use the same term, and it's kind of, I guess, just a decision we made at the Department of Planning and Development. We have other RFPs happening throughout the other parts of the city. Those are specific to parcels. So we have either city-owned parcels that we've identified, and we've said we are seeking proposals for this one parcel or two parcels that we own, or we've collaborated with a property owner like we're doing in the Belmont Triangle on the northwest side of the city. We've collaborated with the property owner there, and they've let us issue a request for proposal for their property. In this case, we don't have a specific property that we're saying we're asking for proposals for this building. It's this geography that we've identified that we want to invite proposals, invite property owners who are struggling to, who want to convert their underutilized office floor space into residential uses, but have been finding it difficult closing their financial gap, or that we know that there are some buildings for sale or under foreclosure, or those, we want to make sure that developers know this is what we are looking for. Be very clear in our invitation for proposals, so developers and property owners know if they are wanting to seek city assistance, this is what we are expecting and requiring in return.
Great, thanks, Cindy. The next two questions are housing related. Will there be availability unhoused element in the residences? And then when will the DOH intake meeting be required, before or after IFP submission? Ricardo, I want to answer those two.
Hi, Emily. Yes, I can take a first shot at these questions. I also see Brian Essenberg on the call, our Deputy Managing Commissioner, like, can assist with questions as well. I would say to reach out to us the earliest the better. Even if it's not an intake meeting, if you have any questions at all in terms of like how the menu of options work for the incentives, or if you want to talk about your overall proposal that you have in mind, we're happy to meet with you and make ourselves available before you submit for an official intake meeting. And this is something that we have already been doing with some of the development teams, having one-on-one info sessions with them. You want to add anything to that, Brian?
Yeah, just to clarify, I guess the intake process with the Department of Housing is really too formal of a term. It's a very much an open door opportunity to engage with the underwriters in the deals, just to talk and ask brass tack questions and just get understanding of how to do business with the city, what type of things are understood, and just to be able to align on what it means when we both look at pro formas together. And it really is an open door. And so it's on Fridays. It's scheduled through an Insight website. It's a very simple link we can send everyone to. And it's an opportunity to engage directly and just be as clear and understanding and ask us any questions you have about the process and how this all works. And just multifamily general funding in general, all of our housing programs. It's not limited to this specific type of initiative. And as it relates to the unhoused, we don't have any formal requirements other than what we're asking for in terms of exchange for affordability. And so as people align whatever resources they can bring to the table, service dollars or whatnot, those are all interesting and great things just to propose on the deal. So but it's not an explicit or an intended requirement at this time.
Thank you, Brian and Ricardo. The next couple questions are more of like a technical submission type of question. Are MBE goals to be applied to the design phase separate from construction? And then will the city require a technology plan for each development?
So the MBWBE goals are applied to the entire redevelopment project so yes, your consultants such as the design phase would need to comply as well. And then technology plan is not a requirement, but again, if you are interested in providing that, that is something we can review, but it's not a required submission from the IFP.
All right. The next question, are there incentives for owners looking to revitalize retail only, no residential conversion, and bring in new retailers to improve the Lasalle Street corridor? I can handle that one. Cindy mentioned earlier in the presentation that we are looking to implement a new small business improvement fund ordinance, which would be specialized along Lasalle Street. It would need city council approval, and we're looking to implement that early next year. So that would probably be more appropriate for the situation where you were looking to only revitalize the ground floor retail space. Cindy, do you have anything to add to that?
No, that's exactly right. We will be revitalizing the retail through this small business improvement grant program that we would be looking to get the ordinance approved before the end of this year and get the funding allocated sometime next year. So please be on the lookout for that, and we'll continue to update our webpage on the South Street, for any updates to the status on that grant program.
Great. The next question is, will the selected projects be required to go through the plan development process as well?
So I can answer that, I guess. Yeah, we kind of explained the downtown, the DC 16, that allows the uses that we would expect to see in this corridor with residential uses above the ground floor and all the retail and entertainment cultural type uses on the ground floor as well as the upper floors by right. And then if you're not expanding the existing building, if you're not increasing the height of the building, then again, you would not be triggering the plan development process. So that's part of the reason why we issued this invitation for proposal, because we do want to make sure that we have an incentive available for property owners and developers so that they can incorporate an affordable component in their conversion project. There's an example of a building on the street already at 29 South Lasalle. It's called the Millennium at Lasalle. And it was an underutilized vacant office building for many years. And a few years ago, the property owners converted that office building into luxury rental apartments. I believe it's like 207 rental units. It's leasing very well from our understanding in discussions with that property owner and the management folks who are there at the building. And again, they did not do it through any zoning change. It was an as of right project. They didn't use any city assistance at the time, but they did use the 20% federal rehabilitation tax credit, which they said they absolutely needed to make their numbers work.
Okay. The next question, is there a list of building addresses that are in the corridor, especially the preferred historic ones?
So we don't have we didn't list all the addresses, but we provided that pretty detailed map. I think this is something we can provide in the FAQ document. We could just list out the addresses and identify, which ones are already landmarked. Really, we would be just, we could put that in an FAQ that we would post on our webpage, so we can follow up on that.
Thank you. Given HB 2621 relies on a base year to derive your incentive, how will the city/assessor think about the base year assessments, given we're dealing with existing buildings? For example, an overly high base year can severely dilute the value of your incentive.
Brian, do you want to help respond to this since it's related to the Affordable Illinois tax incentive?
I think we're going to have to get an answer through an RFP on that one, because it is a great question, and I'm unfortunately not the thought leader on this. Daniel might be better for it, but we can definitely get that responded to.
Okay, so we'll respond later through an FAQ.
Great. If a proposal is not one of the winning proposals, is the city open to continued collaboration in advancing the LaSalle Street plan?
Yeah, this is a great question, and I'm very glad that someone has asked it. Absolutely, we issued this invitation for proposals because we wanted to understand the universe of who is interested in converting their buildings or some of their floor space into residential uses, who is interested in collaborating with the city on activating their vacant retail spaces as well. So absolutely. And even though we've said in the IFP that we're limiting it to up to three projects, we're also trying to understand the universe of who is interested. And we if this is a success, then I think we would absolutely be open to seeing if there is a possibility of a future round, for example, or some other strategy for dealing with the level of interest of the program.
All right. The next one, has the assessor weighed in on how it plans to value the base year or the assessed values during construction for spaces that are converted from office to residential?
We've not specifically done outreach to the assessor about how they would evaluate. Again, it would be very difficult to do this without a specific project in mind and asking a very specific question. I don't think we would get a response, but certainly residential use is a lower valuation than commercial use. So definitely that's something owners should keep in mind when they are considering converting their underutilized office space into another use. It does change the tax base for the building for those uses if you separate the pins based on use.
Will priority be given to smaller projects, thus allowing for a broader distribution of TIF across projects along the corridor?
So our first priority was for the historic buildings, as we've identified in the invitation, we've also identified, we do want to understand if the project would be a catalyst for other projects. And this is an important part of our consideration. That's not to say smaller projects are, shouldn't submit. They should absolutely submit, because you're right. I think that would be, a smaller total project cost and then a smaller gap. And so a smaller amount of city incentives. So we would absolutely encourage you to submit. It's hard for us to know what the universe is of who is interested and who is ready for a project. So we absolutely encourage everyone who is interested and can develop a proposal to submit, and then let us review those. And our goal here is to make sure that the city's investment provides really a lot of bang for the buck, right? So we're looking at making sure that we reactivate this important corridor.
Thank you. And then we have one other question. How does the new 34th Ward and incoming alderman impact the IFP award or decision process?
Yeah, I mean, we don't know who the 34th alderman will be, because, the current 34th alderman is retiring. So for sure, we would want to make sure that the new alderman, when they are sworn in, gets briefed on these proposals. And, as we explained, any redevelopment agreement needs to have city council approval. So absolutely, it's something that we will have to make sure that we brief and provide all the information to that new alderman. Great.
I don't see any other open questions in our Q&A box. So with that, I just want to remind everyone that they should be scheduling meetings with our department if they have any questions, or DOH, coordinating with the State Historic Preservation Office regarding any historic preservation questions. Also share the proposal with the Alderman Riley's office, and reminding everyone that our IFP deadline is noon on December 23rd this year. If there's any specific questions or comments in the meantime, please feel free to reach out to me. My email address is listed on the slide. The other folks on this call, their contact information is listed in the IFP booklet also. So with that, I want to thank everyone for their time today. We're really excited about this initiative, and we're looking forward to collaborating with everyone on this important project.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.